nature.
Basically, I decided I wanted to make sculpture like mountains or like landscape.
We see nature every day, directly, or as directly as our eyes and glasses and contact lenses allow, or indirectly, through media and products of our own creation. But what is left of the wild, the natural state of things, lands untouched by human intention? Are there any of those places left? Or have we left ourselves with only our representations of the wild? There is a thought that a camera can steal the soul, trapping one's essence inside a photograph. In this light, the photographer is the bringer of death, snatching the subject away from time and immortalizing it in an image. Static, eternal. Once you capture a wild thing, you change its context, and that context can never be reversed. Think of an undiscovered patch of land, a unique thing known only as itself. A pair of eyes falls upon the view. The view is sacred, a life-changing experience for the viewer. Photographs are taken to show friends, family. Media publishes the photos, and in 20 years, this patch of land is covered with walking paths. Brochures advertising possible hikes, with details on the corresponding mileage, level of difficulty, and scenic features. The patch of land that was once wilderness is now obliterated, and in its place is a park, a known entity, complete with thousands of celluloid and digital doubles. Author and traveler Jack Turner invokes writer George Trow in calling this scenario the context of no context. The cycle of destruction and rebirth occurring with every minute change, every interaction. Every second, one's former self is destroyed and replaced with a new self, positioned in a slightly different context. Trillions of contextual shifts happening in split seconds. Infinite change over the course of infinite time. The word wilderness is defined in relation to humans, to people. Without people, wilderness is just the natural, inescapable state of things. Without people, there would be no term to communicate the presence or absence of this state. So, do humans stand apart from nature? Or are humans just a continuation of nature?
Well, that gets tough. I think that goes back to the question of like, what is the difference between a human and other species or natural things?
That's Gavin White. He works at the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy.
And that to me, again, is that sort of ability to be self-reflexive, to step outside of systems and think about them, and to draw a straight line. There's no straight lines in nature, but so if you see a straight line somewhere, it's like a trace of humanity. But also, there's this notion of the vessel and pottery and being able to capture and store nature, or to enclose oneself in the house or home. Whether that's, a yurt or a castle, it's still the same idea, being able to separate yourself from the outside world and thereby define yourself as something other than what's out there. There's a guy, his name's Kojin Karatani, and he's probably the most succinct thinker that I know about this subject, and he calls it a will to architecture, which is basically you need to build a system that is defined by you and not by forces that are exterior to it. But it's that same idea of we've got to define the parameters first, and then we can arrange things in an order that we find satisfactory.
As humans that often make straight lines, we have many systems that attempt to bend nature to our will. Gardens, national parks, maps. And we know that a representation of something is not that something. The map is not the territory, and the word is not the thing.
In the painting, to me, that's not the object, or that's not the person, the figure itself. It's to represent, by me or through me as a lens, right? So it's reproduction.
That's Susu. Her work is phenomenal, and we'll check in with her again later. In the series, The Treachery of Images, Magritte painted a pipe, paired with text reading, "This is not a pipe." It's a painting of a pipe. A book on nature is a representation of nature. An e-book of that original book, shining on a backlit screen, is both a representation of nature and of that original book. This is Wind from 1979. Rather, this is an audio recording of wind that existed for a moment in 1979, if one stood in a certain spot and aimed a microphone in a certain direction, and then compressed the sound over the years from tape or DAT to various forms of digital audio files. Here, in the desert, there is silence. An insect sounds massive against the nothingness. I feel bad that there is so much here, but I can only show you a sliver, a cropped image. That's how Susu explains it.
But with the only photograph you took, to me is that you crop the corner from the nature scene. So when the other people look at your photos, they only can transfer so much information from your photograph, from the little corner you dig. So I feel like that's very interesting of how realistic information, or I call it realistic picture image, could deliver some information to everyone. So you can hook up with your own memory, you can hook up with the scene you saw before, but also it's very limited in a way you couldn't really experience in the environments by yourself in person, because you only see in a two-dimensional surface. And it became a material that you could use, or you can send to your friends, through text message. It became something you can post online platform. It kind of only exists in the two-dimensional visual world.
For every shot taken, there are 5,000 more in immediate sight, each one deepening an understanding of this impenetrable world. The immensity of knowledge cannot be contained. Complete documentation of nature is an impossible task. Each unit of time that passes bears witness to millions of interactions which even our world of surveillance cannot keep track of. Through technology, we increase the detail of these cropped images. But will we ever devise a perfect replica, a version of nature that will be indistinguishable from the real thing?
I guess there's a couple of ways that I look at that. One is that, any sort of digital simulation is always ones and zeros. It's always a straight line at the end of the day, right? Even if it goes to the nth decimal point, it's not anything more than ones and zeros. Lots and lots of them. And maybe you can argue that that's how nature works too, but I don't think you can. I think it's more complicated than that. So there's the question of, can you ever really simulate it? And then in reality, even if you could, the complexity of all the smells and chemicals and, so people are using this term now, forest bathing, and you go out into the woods and you really just kind of sit there and let it do its thing. And the truth is that there are scientific studies that say the chemicals that come from the trees make you healthier. Period, right? And so I don't care how realistic the simulation is, you're not getting that direct experience. You're not getting the actual outdoor sunshine. You're not getting the actual dirt on your fingers. And so you're not actually getting the health benefit of being outdoors.
I mean, so many of the things that we think are very simple in nature, they take so much time to reconstruct virtually, so much time and effort to have that quality in a virtual environment.
That's Caroline Record.
I'm an artist and new media museum exhibit developer. So I find that kind of interesting because I can make little choices along that way because I'm constructing it intentionally from scratch.
Caroline is talking about these intricate digital worlds that she creates.
But it's a lot more difficult. It takes a lot more time than if I were to sort of use real world materials and physics to make it happen. Instead, I'm literally writing the physics behind these worlds. Like, you're starting from this blank slate in a profound way. Like, there isn't physics in this world. There isn't real surface. So you have to write the rules. And that's frustrating and laborious, but it's also really interesting to get to choose to write those rules.
Authors Lewis Carroll and George Luis Borges wrote stories of towns and empires that crafted maps. As the maps became more and more accurate, the relationship between the town and the map approached 1-to-1. Borges told of a map crafted in such detail that it covered the entire empire. He wrote,
"The cartographer's skill drew a map of the empire, whose size was that of the empire, coinciding point for point with it. The following generations, who were not so fond of the study of cartography, saw the vast map to be useless, and permitted it to decay and fray under the sun and winters."
As Paul Valéry says,
"Everything simple is false. Everything which is complex is unusable."
Gregory Bateson was an anthropologist, semiotician, and linguist, among other things. In an essay from 1972 titled Form, Substance, and Difference, Bateson spoke of an endless series of maps.
We say the map is different from the territory, but what is the territory? Operationally, somebody went out with a retina and a measuring stick and made representations which they put on paper. What is on a paper map is a representation of what was the retinal representation of the man who made the map. And as you push the question back, what you find is an infinite regress, an infinite series of maps. The territory never gets in at all. Always the process of representation will filter it out, so the mental world is only maps of maps, ad infinitum.
Do you have a pencil and a piece of paper?
8 seconds.
I could draw you a map.
Experience colors everything. Each living thing sees the world from a unique perspective.
But for nature, we all have the experience of living as a human being on Earth, on the planet. So when we're looking at an image, like could be a creature, could be a shot that you took in the neighborhood, you all have like a personal experience you can hook on. So that's forced you to think beyond what you're seeing from the picture. That's forced you to rearrange the story in your head with your personal experiment. So that's give a flexibility.
Our subjective lens allows us to see land in different ways. Land as a backdrop to our story, the individual in nature. Or as land that was taken brutally from indigenous peoples, land disconnected from complex and organic ecosystems. Or as land conserved, to improve our appreciation for other wildlands, to awaken us to the power of nature as both a concept and an actual space, as an ally as we move through time. Representation is unavoidable. There is no true perspective, no absolute truth. There is no view from nowhere. Nature doesn't care about you.
За дефолт, давай за дефолт.
And it would seem that we don't care much for nature either. Let's look at the aspen trees in Colorado.
So yeah, one of the more intriguing things about the aspens, or the aspen trees, that I think people don't realize is that they are one organism. And people come from all over the country just to see these leaves change colors in the fall to this bright golden color, and they stand in this forest and they think to themselves, wow, so many trees. But the root system of them is all shared, so technically the grove you're standing in is possibly derived from one seedling. So you're looking at a group of trees that has just developed with a shared root system and spread out into an absolutely gigantic organism. I mean, it's astounding to think that you're standing in this one forest and it's just one breathing creature. And if you go to different parts of Colorado, the groves can be large enough that they are some of the biggest organisms on the planet, which to me is mind-blowing.
This is John Barstow, a childhood friend of mine, now living in Aspen.
If you look around the hills of Colorado, you see probably two kinds of trees that you'll notice the most, one being the pine tree and the other being the aspen tree, and there's always a distinct line between them. You'll see the dark green of the pines, you'll see the light green of the aspens, and they have this kind of symbiotic relationship where, you know, one forest will replace the other. So as one forest dies, say the pine forest dies, it will later be replaced by an aspen grove. And I just think that that's really interesting around here, because if you're looking at our trees at the moment, they've kind of been managed by humanity over the last 100 years because we're afraid of forest fires. We don't want to burn our land, we don't want to lose our houses, we don't want to scar the land that we're trying to escape into. And as you come out of the Eisenhower tunnels, you'll notice that there's all these old pine trees there, and they're all dying, and that's because of the pine beetle. And over the last 20 or so years, our winters have been warming up, and traditionally, the pine beetle would have been killed off by the cold. So every winter, the pine beetle is going into the pine trees, it's eating them, but then the temperature drops to a certain point that the pine beetle can't tolerate, and it's killed off. Now, as we're experiencing these warmer winters, or this shift in winter, where winter is coming later, we aren't experiencing the sharp temperature decrease or the temperature variant we've had before, where the temperature dips to the level that kills the pine beetles, so the pine beetles are living and killing more trees. So now we're faced with this problem of how do we get rid of the pine beetle? But that problem is two bad decisions down the line. We should have probably let the forest take its natural cycle, and when the pines are dying, you let them die, and then they burn, and then they're replaced by the aspen tree.
We have removed, replanted, and reconstructed nature in our image. It's getting to the point that there is little wilderness left. But let's say there is wilderness. Where is it?
On the one hand, it's safe to say that even in a place as big as America, right, there's no such thing as real wilderness anymore. Even the national parks are super carefully maintained, especially the national parks, because you have so many visitors to see this beautiful, wild nature, right, that they're ruining it every day. So they have to be consciously keeping that place wild. On the other hand, there are cities and suburbs that are, more obviously maintaining nature and keeping it at bay, but that still requires daily maintenance, whether it's, salting the roads or fixing potholes or, it's a constant struggle. To me, that means that nature is ever present. It's just not as desired in certain places as others. And either way, you've got to work to keep it the way it is. It's, we've passed a Rubicon of some kind that, unless you're way north up in the Yukon or something, maybe you could argue, oh, you're breaching new territory. But for the most part, whatever manifest destiny is over, we're stuck with preserving what we have or ruining it some more.
So, anyone want to play soccer? Yeah, nope.
In cultivating nature, we create a double, an imitation of some vision of nature. This construction is a mirror of sorts, a view into the idyllic wild, tempered by the needs of human survival, pleasure, or capital.
And today we're at the Wild West town. Yeehaw!
Umberto Eco says,
"The ideology of this America wants to establish assurance through imitation.
Look at how the American West and the vast desert of water called the ocean are sanitized and made safe for family entertainment. It's part reverence and interest in the unknown, but these places also speak to our desire for security." Eco adds,
But profit defeats ideology, because the consumers want to be thrilled not only by the guarantee of the good, but also by the shudder of the bad.
So I guess it's so commonplace and it's so expected that we have these fake versions of these natural things, and I feel like the fact that it is so common is the thing that I want to, like the fact that it's not only is it so common, but it's fully replaced the experience of anything natural. So much so that we're not even totally aware of it or not aware of that shift. Like that's what I'm sort of trying to bring attention to. And I guess using decoys sort of gets at that in a way too, where it's like, this is meant to deceive. It's like it's replacing the actual animal, furthering this illusion. That's why I include the snow from like movie set snow too, where there's this quality of illusion where it's like, as long as this facsimile is close enough, we're willing to believe that it is the thing that it's replacing.
And I think that's evident wherever you look. I mean, if you look at a ski hill, everyone's escaping to the mountains to spend time outside, and here we are clear-cutting runs and then inserting metal poles, and that's our outdoors, that's our nature. And to me, it's funny. And I think it's something you become more aware of the longer you're out here. You have people that escape from the resorts, and they don't see that as skiing or snowboarding. They see going into the backcountry and, you know, self-propelling up a mountain and skiing down. That to them is skiing and escaping into nature. And after 10 or 13 years here, you begin to realize that resort skiing is kind of a manicured version of nature that is more acceptable to people that aren't used to being in the wilderness because it scares them. But to them, that's as wild as it needs to be. And any wilder would be inaccessible.
Yeah, both of y'all. Yes, y'all go back to SeaWorld. 1,700. Hey. God damn.
What I believe is that there is a collective shift that has been happening and continues to happen, where there is this sense of awareness of an appreciation for having a relationship to nature where we are not separate from it.
A byproduct of imitating nature is a real affection for nature. Viewed through that appreciation, we see the definition of wilderness change. Nature loses its total indifference, its indifference to humanity, and becomes personal, something we can carry with us. Okay, I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about a wilderness of knowledge, things beyond our understanding, a different definition of wild.
Have you ever been to Kecksburg? No. Kecksburg, a UFO crashed in 1962 in a farmer's field. But that triangle that runs like Greensburg, Kecksburg down to Connellsville, like it's almost a triangle right off of 40. There's so much weird supernatural things that are unexplained that happen in that area. And then you have disappearances, you have Bigfoot sightings, and you have this UFO crash on top of it. So there's all sorts of weird shit that's happening that there's a UFO shop, an antique shop called UFO in Greensburg, and they have a couple of DVDs that are like egregiously priced, that they're self-made too on top of that, and you're like, I don't know if I really want to watch some small town shit documentary. Maybe I can just find this on YouTube or something. I've been to Kecksburg. You can't get to the field where the crash was. It's on private property, but there is in the parking lot of the volunteer fire department a pole with a likeness of the spaceship on it, and it looks like either an acorn or a big pile of baby shit. It's a very small sort of craft, and I had gone into the VFD and I talked to this older guy, just sort of, poking and asking a few questions, and whether he was playing or what, he was utterly ridiculous. It was like, I was there in 62, but I can't tell you anything about it. And then he just started rattling conspiracy theories at me for like 20 minutes. There's also a large Air Force base in Ohio that's done some secret, I'm going to air quote everything, sorry. Just air quote everything. Everything that you're skeptical of, it's an air quote. That's, I think it's outside of Columbus. There's an experimental aircraft base in Ohio that I've heard about. So I think that's legitimate. You can find that information. So
there is a drive to understand the unknown, a promise that understanding will lead to comfort. And maybe there's something out there rooting for us, secretly lending a helping hand. Conspiracy theories thrive in the United States. These are stories for the common people. It's always the farmer that is swept up in the beam of light, transported deep into the stars, and returned home with a memory wipe. Rich people hand over piles of cash in the hope that they can connect with Xenu. But the working class actually makes contact. Despite the inherent complexity of conspiracies, the massive number of co-conspirators needed across various institutions, these theories simplify life into an us versus them relationship. We, the victims of the conspiracy, are good truth seekers, fighting against the dark forces, trying to turn our world into a hellscape of consolidated wealth and power. Or something. Conspiracy theories continue the traditions set in folklore, in myth. Told as truth, as fact, they aim to influence beliefs and attitudes, to reveal knowledge of an other reality. And yes, in some cases, the theory is proven fact. The CIA's MK Ultra program explored the possibility of behavior modification and mind control through the use of LSD.
I hallucinated a fish that just came and swallowed the worm. And I said to myself, oh boy, this is it. This stuff is really as good as they say it is.
The FBI was running surveillance on Beatle John Lennon. The CIA did run an ethically scorched fake vaccination program to locate Osama bin Laden. Smoking cigarettes and consuming sugar are bad for you. The Ford Motor Company did run torture camps in Argentina in the 1970s. And at least a few million of that $600 billion US military budget was spent on researching UFOs. But to date, there is little support for a UN takeover of the US with a swarm of black helicopters. And environmentalists did not cause Deepwater Horizon to explode, sending 4.9 million barrels worth of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The culprit there is the oil and gas industry. Roman Emperor Nero did not fake his death, despite what the Bible says. Hitler is not living on the moon. Beyonce is not part of the Illuminati. Peter the Great was not the Antichrist. Benito Mussolini was also not the Antichrist, but close. Barack Obama is not the Antichrist. The Denver International Airport does not sit above a secret New World Order city. Masons did not sink the Titanic. Israel doesn't use animals to spy on people. The CIA didn't invent HIV. The Earth is not flat, nor is it hollow. To date, NASA has not used hologram technology to prove the existence of God in order to usher in an evil global government. White people in white majority countries are not minorities. Unfortunately and devastatingly, the Holocaust happened. And climate change is occurring and will, in time, bring about the demise of organized human culture. In 1950, Bertrand Russell said,
"Nothing in the world is more exciting than a moment of sudden discovery or invention, and many more people are capable of experiencing such moments than is sometimes thought."
Conspiracy theories are appealing because they present an opportunity for sudden discovery. In some cases, there is a desire for an answer that doesn't exist in reality. A desire for the unknown when the answer is already obvious, vetted, and known as truth. But in some circumstances, there is a gap in our knowledge, and these theories aim to fill it. This place is called Two Guns. It's an abandoned town near Flagstaff, Arizona. There is a history to this place. It involves mass murder, a zoo, a guided tour, and the dissemination of a fabricated history. But little of that history is evident from its current state. If the conspiracy theory provides information without physical evidence, the ghost town is physical evidence without information. It's an image, a cropped image, but cropped out of time. And for the short time that you walk through its remaining structures, it's a feeling. A cold shudder in the dry desert heat. The shed skin of past intentions. Post-human wilderness. Google Maps has reduced the mystery of the world. We now have access to see places we can never visit, but this form of mapping inadvertently revealed secrets that we didn't know existed.
What is that? This looks like... I have no clue. I know.
Holy Jesus. What is that? Jesus H. Christ.
What is that? Oh, what is that?
This is a cavern in Missouri. If you take the tour, you are treated to a recording of Celine Dion, a Canadian, singing God Bless America, while a light show is projected onto a massive sheet wall. This part of the tour is called The Greatest Show Under the Earth. Representation of nature can gloss over history, but it can also uncover the evolution of a space. Amy Granite's 2009 landscape film shows the pre-Columbian Cahokia burial mounds. Today, 80 mounds survive, providing a partial visual of a thriving trading town, boasting a population in the tens of thousands. Over time, these human-made mounds became the landscape. The film shows additional layers of human construction: roads, flagpoles, walking paths. The current landscape is the result of systems. Systems that claim land, systems that develop it, systems that cause abandonment, and systems that reclaim the past. Let's take a look at other systems of transformation. In 1865, the discovery of oil brought 15,000 people to what became the town of Pithole, an oil boomtown with 54 hotels, 3 churches of different denominations, and the nation's first oil pipeline. There were brothels built along First Street, and the Pithole Daily Record opened in September 1865. In the first issue of that newspaper, the editor wrote,
"A few weeks ago, the rapid influx of strangers crowded, nightfall, every tenement. Beds, sofas, even chairs were luxuries for the few."
In 1887, Charles C. Leonard published a book called History of Pithole, writing of a narrow wooden town where
the smell of new lumber, fresh paint, and crude is everywhere discernible. Here may be seen a building which is neither sided, floored, nor finished, but the roof is up, from the peak of which swings a sign informing the public that oil leases will there be bought and sold, if the building gets finished and the owner gets time.
Pithole was a town built on exploitation of the land and its ability to manufacture profit. In 1886, when a group of banks collapsed, financial panic spread throughout the region. The oil bubble burst. A string of fires claimed whole city blocks and left 27 oil wells in smoldering heaps. Regional oil strikes drew workers away from Pithole. The newspaper relocated to Petroleum City, Pennsylvania in 1868, and by 1870 the population of Pithole was only 237 people. 7 years later, the parcel of land that was Pithole, and which sold for $2 million in 1865, was sold back to the county for $4.37.
It's tough because, it's really hard to define that point at which humanity interrupted, right? And nature is not perfect in and of itself. The idea that nature is a necessary good that we have interrupted is not necessarily fair either, because there are always going to be species that are more dominant than others. There's always going to be change. And that is, the course of things. But at the same time, there are, more responsible ways of living with nature or being more thoughtful about the level of which you control or destroy systems that are natural, that we probably could be thinking more about.
In the pursuit of progress, humans create systems that they cannot fully understand.
Tonight at 10, jobs and prosperity must come first in any Brexit deal.
Let's look at the mess of derivatives and futures and shorts that is the stock market. And let's talk about it while we look at this scene of a city being destroyed in SimCity. The stock market is not real in the sense that you can hold something in your hand. The stock market is a representation of material goods, a system of artificial values assigned to things like gold, silver, grapes, and marijuana. Slivers of ownership in companies that make bombs, genetically altered seeds, and Care Bears. It started with owning shares of a company. You could trace this concept back to the Roman Empire, but now we speculate on more than just the health of the company. You can buy options on the success of a summer blockbuster, or on the weather, average temperatures, and the number of hurricanes that hit the coast. You can also buy shares in the destruction of our natural world by purchasing carbon credits. Today's version of the indulgences once sold by the Roman Catholic Church. The stock market is a second layer of life covering our known world, where everything is assigned a value, not a true value, but speculative. Currently, computer programs run a large portion of the stock market transactions, quickly analyzing price histories to develop buy and sell strategies in milliseconds. Systematic hedge funds that don't need to eat or sleep.
So, what a lot of environmentalists these days are trying to do is find ways to put dollar values on natural systems and ecosystem services and natural capital and yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, I think there's something very sort of ironic and contrary about that, because the truth is that all you're doing is translating what are not at all quantifiable values into something that you can put a dollar sign on and therefore sell on the market. It's ironic to me because it's an effort to preserve the environment, but to do that, they're containing the environment and putting it in a little box and saying, okay, this, here's the sticker price for that little piece of nature over here. And I don't know, it's bizarre. I guess it'd be the same thing as like if you're, being conquered by some other empire, you have to learn their language and make a treaty with them. But ultimately, we've seen those treaties are not all that favorable to the person who had to learn the language.
Tell of the birth, tell how war appeared on earth.
War. Maybe we didn't create war, but we sure seem to like it. We like war because we like money. When you tie war to economic prosperity, you remove the incentive for peace. It becomes advantageous to destroy life. In her short piece, Garden Agone, Susan Stewart defines the final state of both war and the garden as death, saying, "The ends of war are the destruction of life and undoing of order. But the garden promises cyclical time in which living things might extend beyond their markers, and death remains in its season. In the garden, death becomes the seedbed of birth." We also create things of beauty, things that yearn to be in cadence with nature. Tucked in a non-existent place called Bear Run is a house, praised for its boldness of design, its challenge to accepted engineering practices, and its integration with nature. Falling Water. Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture is rightfully celebrated, but one should note that this nature, the woods surrounding the house, was, in part, manufactured, lovingly, but still. The Kaufmans of department store fame who commissioned the house uprooted outer-lying plants and replanted them to intensify the area near the house. They brought in non-native species: Japanese iris, English ivy, lily of the valley. One must remember that the land near Falling Water was full of sawmills and logging sites, coal mines, and 2 relatively short-lived Masonic hotels, all before being bought by the Kaufmans as a camp for their workers, which came with reforesting and water improvement efforts. Of the landscape surrounding Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water, friends would comment, "Best landscape God never created." Nature improved.
Hey man, this is my driveway. Oh.
Lynn Margulis, who substantiated endosymbiosis, said, "Life did not take over the globe by combat, but by networking. So maybe we need to collaborate with nature again and forget the desire to dominate." In his book Falling Water Rising, author Franklin Toker writes,
"A post-Holocaust and post-Hiroshima age can never reconnect with the sublime as it was once perceived, as the untrammeled power of nature."
The atomic bomb is cast as the original sin of modern times. But there is no going back, and there's actually nowhere to go back to. Whatever past place you think existed is tinged with nostalgia, subjectivity, warped in selective memory and history. Wilderness will never be revived, and if, in the future, it crawls back through our mess, it will be something new. You pull over at a rest stop. There is a park here. You sit on a bench, pop open a Coke, and take a deep breath. You're happy that your foot can rest leisurely instead of pressed against a gas pedal. You take another breath, thinking 4 deep breaths will suffice. You long to spend more time here, but you don't know what you would do. You understand that this is a manufactured space, a fenced-in yard, a decoy to trick your mind into relaxing, to melt the tension in your shoulders. This place is a simulation. It's a real park, but it's fake nature. Now, you are standing in an open field west of a white house with a boarded front door. There is a small mailbox here. In the early 70s, text-based video games encroached on the fantasy worlds occupied by books and stories, radio, art, and music. Self-contained games like Zork gave players a brand new world to explore, a digital wilderness without the friction of real life. These worlds had creators, programmers that knew every inch of the map. A map without a physical territory. Take bottle. Take sword. Things progress. Simulations became more lifelike. This is Desert Strike: Return to the Gulf from 1992, a heavily simplified game based on the Gulf War. Absent are the century-old land disputes, the decades of U.S. meddling, and the complications caused by fluctuating oil prices. Instead, this bestseller asks you to shoot things, refuel your Apache, and bring death to the enemy. Here in 2016, we are just trying to survive.
And if we find another stick, we should be able to craft an axe, and then we'll be able to hit trees for wood.
Bueno. Hola otra vez.
But as these new digital environments grow more complex and more alive, they become more surprising. And surprises allow the simulation to more closely resemble daily life.
VR, AR, mixed reality is a wilderness, absolutely. It's a frontier, it's an unknown territory, it's a vast space, and there's a lot of room for really different experiences, different voices, different value systems to be explored and stories to be told through this medium. That makes it more interesting to me to work with it because I see space to create something different. I don't know, I hate to even admit this, but my phone sometimes is like, sleeps under my pillow, you know? So we are fully attached to systems of digital creation and digital control and information. I mean, I definitely am a person who believes that we need to really be conscious of the kind of technology that we're creating. I think value systems is really the important key here. It's like, what value systems and hierarchies are we perpetuating and literally coding into the technology that we adopt and that we spread into the world? If we only create violent video games, then what do you think we're perpetuating? I mean, In VR, actually, the majority of the experiences that I know about are violent. They're all like shooters or fighting zombies, or you're punching things. I mean, what I was realizing is that the system is crafted to create violent experiences, actually. The particle systems that you work with are mostly made for explosions and blood splatter and, you know, fire and all sorts of things. In order to create a different kind of experience, you have to sort of like break what they want you to do. So we're creating an experience that tries to highlight embodied interaction in mixed reality. One of the biggest concepts that's come through doing these user studies is the question of trust. Everybody, 100% of the people so far have said that trust is one of the fundamental emotions and experiences of doing this project. How do they trust that their cables are going to be managed so that they're not going to fall? How do they trust that the other person in the room, is going to treat them with respect? And I think the question of trust in immersive media is one of the most important things we can be looking at right now. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about it. I mean, our brains are so incredible in their ability to adapt to a new environment. And suddenly, we're in another place and we're trying to negotiate how to deal with this new environment. I think that's one thing that makes these virtual experiences so real. What you see is what you believe, And so when my whole vision is taken up by this whole new world, then I'm gonna treat it like it's actually happening to me,
These digital worlds aren't the first self-contained environments that we have built. Think of the theater. Massive sets and characters. Even those not in the spotlight have a secret life, pulled and pushed by a mysterious gravity. Even this film is a version of a world. There's the frame. Every second you see 30 frames fly by, simulating real life. Digital representations of living, breathing things. You hear my voice, calmly discussing some topic.
Oh, that's an emu.
That's an emu, yeah.
Peppering it with quotes from philosophers, interviews with friends, and other narrators acting out texts from history. There are visual and oral jokes to keep us from sliding into a discussion about the void and the meaninglessness of everything. The system stays in balance.
Yes, but what happens when you break the rules of the world? What if I just take it from here and direct the rest of this film? Am I continuing with the world, or creating a new world inside of the original? Or is it outside of it? Am I playing a role that is a natural extension of this system, or am I the straight line drawing other, sitting above this, thinking less of it, and molding it to my preferences.
What's that?
Damnation. Damnation. Removal from time and memory. To become oblivion. A state where the true wild cannot be remembered, because there will be no living peer, no natural observer. But many lives are gone and forgotten. It happens all the time. How can you miss something you never knew existed? Longing for a fantasy is not the same as longing for a memory, and memory warps the truth. Today we have documentation. Sure, you have to back it up to some new format every 10 years. But here's the map, here's the territory, the Grand Canyon, the underground, and the mountaintops, the desert. Damn, how I miss it. Jerks making movies while driving at 75 miles per hour, frogs in a pond in a cemetery, sending rockets to the heavens, throwing baseballs at birds. Storm-tossed trees on the news. Lava flowing all day and all night, wild humans defying reality in the digital realm. Ancient goblins, old mountains, new mountains, waterfalls, all on tape or on a t-shirt or a ticket stub, all on bed sheets or jumper or do-rag, all on dyed paper and wallpaper maps and address books, all the nothing that is, all the nothing that is not.